My name is Kathleen Merrigan. I'm in Cummings & Lockwood's Greenwich office, and my practice is a little bit different from my colleagues who you've heard from this morning in that my focus is strictly residential real estate. So today I'm going to speak to you about assisting your clients who are ready to downsize from their home. This is really more than just a move for your client. It's a pretty emotional time in their lives, and your clients may have lived in this house for decades, raised families there, and now it's time to downsize and move on to the next step, and it's not always the easiest thing for them. So while that's not a legal or a technical point, I think we have to start from that point in realizing that the way to manage this and to help your clients the most is to try to keep this as smooth and stress-free as possible. It's important to have a team in place early. And of course, that team includes a good real estate attorney. It doesn't have to be me. Also find a good realtor. Your clients probably have someone in mind. They've asked around, they've talked to their neighbors, they've talked to their friends, but the most important thing is to have a real estate attorney review the listing agreement with the broker. So if your client is selling a $10 million house and they've agreed to a commission with the broker of 5%, we're talking about a $500,000 contract. Most people would want an attorney to review a $500,000 contract, but you'd be surprised how quickly people sign listing agreements with their brokers without having anyone take a look at it. There are certain terms in those listing agreements that we like to revise and other revisions that we like to make if our clients think about having us take a look at those first. Your client's going to want to find a good moving company, and at this stage in their lives, many of your clients need more than just someone to pack up boxes and throw them into a U-Haul. So I would highly recommend considering a full service or concierge moving company. These are generally referred to as move managers, and there is actually just something to note. There's a National Association of Senior Move Managers, and if you look on their website, they have move managers that have been certified by them, and they're particularly helpful in really coming in and helping your clients to organize their belongings, to get rid of things, to donate items, to sell items. They'll set up estate sales, auctions, they'll pack everything, they'll unpack everything in their new home and organize it again on that end. And I had a client who said that they had literally set up their new living room. When she walked into the new house, the new living room was set up exactly like her old living room, and it just really helped that whole process for her, just to make it a little bit less stressful. And then finally, getting rid of stuff. No storage units. This is a real gift to your family, to get rid of things now. So those are just a few practical points. But in order to really effectively plan their next step, your clients are going to need to know how much money they will actually net from the sale of their home. So of course, they need to understand closing costs, moving costs, amounts that they'll need to pay off any mortgages that still exist, and that can help get a sense of the net proceeds. But they'll also need to know whether they will be subject to capital gains tax. So if they meet certain conditions, they can exclude the first $250,000 of gain from the sale of their home, and that's for an individual. A married couple filing jointly can exclude the first $500,000 of gain. And any remaining gain would be subject to the capital gains tax, which, if their home is in Connecticut, could be close to 31% total capital gains tax, depending on your client's income tax bracket. So to calculate that gain, your client really needs to know their cost basis in the property. And just to put it simply, your cost basis is the price that you paid when you purchased your home. So then that number is adjusted by adding any increases to basis and subtracting any decreases to basis. Increase to basis would be an improvement to the home, and a decrease would be any losses that the property may have had. I have just a simple example here just to illustrate. So if your clients purchased their home in 1990 for $1 million and then made improvements of $700,000, valued at $700,000. Their adjusted basis, so that would be an increase to the basis, and the adjusted basis would be $1.7 million. The sale price in 2018 is now $2.3 million. So less that adjusted basis of $1.7, and you have a gain of $600,000. So if it's a married couple filing jointly, then $500,000 of that gain would be excluded, and just $100,000 that remains would be subject to capital gains tax. So that's a very simple example, but I think that gives you just an idea of how it works. This is just in your materials. It's a helpful list that the IRS considers to be of what they consider to be improvements that actually increase basis. So these are any improvements that really add to your home's value and increase the life of your home. So an addition to the house, or putting in a new driveway, or something that really adds to your home's value would increase your basis. And repairs that really are just, maintenance and repairs, painting and cleaning the gutters, those sort of things, those would not actually increase the basis of your home. So it's helpful just to refer to this list, and some things do fall into kind of a gray area. But the real important point here is to advise your clients at this stage, when they're just starting to think about downsizing, to gather up any receipts or any evidence they have of the improvements that they've made, so that they have some backup for those the value of those increases to the basis of their property. Now, for the exclusion to apply, there are several eligibility requirements that must be met. And first is an ownership requirement. So they're required to have owned the home for 2 of the last 5 years leading up to the date of sale of the property. For a married couple filing jointly, only one spouse has to meet that ownership test. The second requirement is a residence requirement. So they must have resided in the home for at least 2 years of the last 5 years. It doesn't have to be a single block of time. It just has to be 730 days of residence during the last 5-year period. And both spouses have to meet that residence requirement individually for a married couple filing jointly in order for them to get the full $500,000 exclusion. They also can't have taken this exclusion in the last 2 years. And then there is an exception for a widowed taxpayer. So a widowed taxpayer could still be eligible for that $500,000 exclusion if they sell the home within 2 years of the death of their spouse, they've not remarried at the time of the sale, and if they have not taken that exclusion in the last 2 years, and also if the deceased spouse has not taken that exclusion in the past 2 years. And the client also has to have met the 2-year ownership and residence requirements. And if necessary for the ownership requirement, you can include the deceased spouse's time of ownership. So once they have a handle on the economics of their sale, their home sale, it's important for clients to understand if there are any other issues that might be out there relating to their house. A great thing that we would try to do as soon as we have a client that tells us that they plan to sell their home is to run a title search. And that really just tells us if there are any title issues, any old open mortgages that we need to take care of. Sometimes mortgages are paid off 20 years ago, but there's no release recorded on the land record. So we have to contact the lender and try to get a substitute release and take care of that. So it can all be done, it just takes time, and ordering these right at the outset of a transaction is helpful just to alleviate stress for your client. And in addition, we would run a municipal search, and that shows if there are any open building permits. If we don't know about this early enough and we wait to order a municipal search, then we have a client who's already pretty emotional about selling their house. A couple weeks before closing finds that they need to they put a generator in their house 5 years ago, and they now need to go apply for a permit and get it inspected, and they might have to move it, and it just really adds to what is already a very hectic time for them. So doing this early is very important. And then this is just a side note that in October of 2017, Connecticut passed a law that deems that any building permit that's been open for more than 9 years is now deemed closed by operation of law. So if you did put in a generator 10 years ago and you took out a permit, if you didn't close it out, it's now deemed closed. But it only applies if you actually took out a permit. So if you didn't take out a permit, you're still in that situation of running around and trying to get it closed out. And then just a final note, if you have a client who's downsizing and they had owned their home jointly with their spouse and their spouse is now deceased, you need to make them aware of the estate tax lien. So any real estate that's owned at the time of an individual's death is subject to both a federal and Connecticut estate tax lien. So if the property is jointly held by spouses and one spouse is deceased, then while that property will automatically pass to the surviving joint tenant, by operation of law, there still remains that lien against the property. So this doesn't really affect your client while they continue to live in the home, but once they go to sell it, they won't be able to sell it free of the lien without applying for this release or obtaining a closing letter from the IRS or the state of Connecticut. So we can help with this, and we would of course submit any of the applications that are needed to get these liens, but it can just take some time to get those. So again, The earlier that we know this, the better. And it's also important for your clients to know about this lien, because if the estate taxes have not yet been paid, then the IRS may actually require us at closing to hold all of the proceeds until those taxes have been paid or until a release has been issued. They want to make sure that they're getting their money, and they don't want this asset to be transferred out of the estate until they're sure of that. So if they have some comfort level that there are other assets in the estate that will adequately provide for the estate taxes, then that they may not require us to hold the funds in escrow, but it is a real possibility that all the net proceeds may be required to be held in escrow. So if your clients are planning on using that money, or they need that right after closing, then they should know about this right at the outset. So really, bottom line is just helping to plan properly, get everyone involved early, and make this a seamless and stress-free process for your clients.